If your heart is too open to the world will trample it without meaning to. Not because people are cruel, but because what is always available becomes invisible. Pause for a moment. Let this truth settle. You may have believed that being kind, always present, always saying yes, would win you love and respect. But what you received in return was confusion, fatigue, and often quiet disrespect. And yet, the lesson is not to become cold. The lesson is to become conscious, still, rooted, discerning. Too much friendliness is not always a reflection of love. Often, it is a symptom of fear, the fear of being left out, unloved, or alone. But here is the paradox. Only when you no longer fear being alone do others begin to value your presence. There is a quiet truth that many people overlook in their daily lives, especially in the realm of relationships. Whether romantic, familial, or social, it is this: your energy teaches others how to treat you. Not your words, not your good intentions, and not the kindness you offer freely. At the root of human interaction lies something older than language, a silent language of presence, posture, and personal power. And when you are too friendly, when you give too much too soon, what you're really doing is making yourself emotionally inexpensive. Like a coin passed from hand to hand, you lose your shine, not because of your value, but because of how casually you're offered. Imagine walking into a room where a candle is already lit, the scent already diffused, the warmth already spread out. You appreciate it, yes, but it doesn't captivate you. Now imagine the same room in silence and darkness, and the moment that candle is lit, the shift, the attention, the value placed on that single source of light is amplified. This is the difference between presence given with discernment and energy handed over carelessly. Let me tell you a story. There once was a monk who lived at the edge of a busy marketplace. He was well known, not because he spoke often, but because when he did, his words carried weight. People respected him, not because he was always available, but because he was rarely seen. A young man once came to him frustrated, saying, "Master, I have tried everything. I am kind to people, I help them, I give my time, I'm always available, and yet they ignore me. They take me for granted." The monk looked at him calmly and said, "You are like water in the river. Everyone dips their hands freely. Try becoming the morning dew instead, rare still, and seen only by those who rise early enough to notice." This parable reveals an ancient truth backed even by modern science. Neuroscience shows us that humans are wired to notice change, scarcity, and contrast. The brain's reward systems are activated more intensely when something is earned rather than given freely. This is called dopaminergic anticipation, the psychological pleasure not in receiving something, but in the pursuit, in the delay, in the value implied by the wait. If you are always present, always saying yes, always offering your time, you may believe you're being noble. But in the subconscious mind of others, you begin to register as neutral background noise. Like furniture in the room, you're just there. And the moment you're always there, you teach them that your time, your attention, your emotional presence require no effort to receive. That's not humility. That's energetic leakage. In relationships, this dynamic is even more intensified. Too often we mistake being overly available for love, but real love is not needy. Real connection requires polarity, an energy exchange of respect, curiosity, and value. When one person becomes too accessible, the balance is lost. Emotional attraction diminishes. Respect quietly erodes. And worst of all, the overly available person begins to feel invisible, even though they're trying so hard to be seen. In Eastern philosophy, we speak of the centered self, a person who moves from inner strength, not from external validation. This person does not rush to be liked. They do not bend themselves to fit into every situation. They carry their energy with stillness, like a sword in its sheath. Dangerous, yes, but calm. Present, but not intrusive. Kind, but not excessive. Being friendly is beautiful, but being too friendly, especially when it lacks discernment, is a form of self-abandonment. It says, "I will give you all of me, even if you haven't shown me who you are." It's a reversal of healthy connection, and often, it stems not from love but from fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of being alone, the fear of being misunderstood. But when you act from fear, you teach others to treat you like an option. Think about someone in your life who you deeply respect. Chances are, they are not someone who calls you every day. Not someone who says yes to everything. not someone who is always readily accessible, but rather someone who is balanced, measured, consistent. Their attention feels like a gift, not a transaction. That's the energetic truth you must internalize. You don't need to become distant. You don't need to withdraw love. But you must become selective, because not everyone is qualified to receive your energy. Just as not every hand is trained to hold fine crystal, not every person is prepared to hold the weight of your emotional availability. And this leads us into the second essential principle. Availability without boundaries weakens your inner core. You see, the human nervous system is not designed to give unlimited access to others. From a physiological perspective, chronic overexposure, emotionally, mentally, or physically, creates stress. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for the fight or flight response, becomes overactive when we are constantly in a state of output, especially without reciprocity. Your body interprets this constant giving as a form of danger. You become emotionally dysregulated, easily fatigued, prone to anxiety, and often resentful. The boundary is not a wall. The boundary is the skin of the soul. It is what keeps the internal world sacred and ordered. And when those boundaries are weak or non-existent, because you're trying to please, to be liked, or not cause discomfort, you begin to betray yourself, little by little. There's an old saying in Zen practice: if your cup is always open to others, the rain will wash you away. You must learn when to close the cup, when to say, I am here, but not for everything. I am kind, but not endlessly accessible. I am available, but not without limits. This is not arrogance. This is self-respect. In relationships, this manifests in subtle but powerful ways. A woman who always says yes to a man's demands, even at the cost of her peace, begins to notice that his respect fades. A friend who constantly cancels their own plans to accommodate another begins to feel used, not appreciated. A parent who tries to be more of a friend than a guide loses the child's sense of discipline and direction. Emotional boundaries teach others what is acceptable and what is not. But more importantly, they teach you what your values truly are. And when you honor them, something profound happens. You begin to feel stronger, more peaceful, more rooted. Because you are no longer leaking your energy into spaces that do not water your soul in return. Let me share a story from a student I once guided. She was a gentle soul, always helpful, always accommodating, always smiling. But under the surface, she was tired. In every relationship, she gave too much. She listened endlessly, tolerated mistreatment, and silenced her own needs. One day, she came to me and said, "Master, I feel like I am disappearing." I asked her, "Who asked you to disappear?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "No one. I chose it. Because I thought that was love." I told her, "That is not love. That is surrendering your spirit without invitation." Over time, we worked on her breath, on her posture, on reclaiming her sense of internal space. I gave her a single instruction for 30 days: do not offer yourself unless you are asked. In that time, she noticed something incredible. Many people fell away, but those who remained, who asked, who listened, who gave back, became more precious. She had filtered out what was noise from what was truth. This is the wisdom of boundaries. They do not isolate you. They purify your circle. In the language of the Shaolin, we call this preserving the essence. Your essence, your key, your life force, is not meant to be scattered. It must be channeled. And that begins by saying, I choose not to be available to everyone. Not because I don't care, but because I care deeply, and I must protect the source from which I give. When your inner core is strong, your friendliness becomes authentic, not desperate. Your presence becomes radiant, not draining. You become a person others want to be around, not because you always say yes, but because your no is grounded and your yes is powerful. Emotional discipline is not about being cold. It's about being clear. It's about knowing that your time, your energy, your kindness, they are sacred. And anything sacred must be approached with intention, not convenience. In modern psychology, this is known as secure attachment, a state where you are emotionally connected to others, but not dependent on their approval for your identity. When you practice boundaries, you're not pushing people away. You are making space for respect to grow. You're saying, if you want to be close, let it be mutual, let it be conscious, let it be real. There's a deep inner peace that arises when you stop over-giving. When you sit quietly with yourself and say, I am enough. I don't need to impress. I don't need to overextend. I don't need to prove. I just need to be in harmony with myself. And from that harmony, the right people, those attuned to your value, will come. They will not just take. They will give. They will not just speak. They will listen. They will not just want your availability. They will earn your presence. That is the beginning of true connection. And it starts within. There is a subtle illusion many people live under without even realizing it, the belief that if they simply give more of themselves, more kindness, more understanding, more availability, they will finally receive what they long for in return: love, loyalty, respect. But in truth, it often creates the opposite effect. The more one chases connection without discernment, the more elusive that connection becomes. And there is a reason rooted in both Eastern wisdom and modern psychology. People respect what they must reach toward, not what is placed too easily in their grasp. When you give too much of your attention without it being earned, you remove the opportunity for mutual growth. You interrupt a natural rhythm, one where both individuals must lean in to meet halfway. This imbalance begins to shift not only the dynamic of the relationship, but also the way each person views the other's presence. Emotional access, when handed over too soon or too freely, devalues the experience of earning closeness, which is essential to lasting respect. Consider this: when someone receives a gift they didn't ask for, without effort or intention, they often feel gratitude momentarily. But that gift quickly fades in significance. Compare that to something they've worked toward, something that demanded presence, care, attention. What we work for, we protect. What we are given without effort, we often misuse. This is not because people are unkind. It is because human nature is wired for meaning, and meaning is born from effort. In relationships, this dynamic plays out in countless quiet moments. A woman constantly checking in on her partner, asking if he's okay, always initiating contact, planning all the moments. She believes she is nurturing love. But unconsciously, she is removing the natural space needed for her partner to lean in, to wonder, to miss her. And slowly, his effort fades. He doesn't realize it, but he begins to see her not as someone to cherish, but as someone whose attention he can always depend on, whether he shows up fully or not. Love is not maintained by constant presence. Love is maintained by conscious presence, and conscious presence can only exist when both people are emotionally awake enough to engage intentionally. The ancient Taoist sages spoke of a principle called Wu Wei, non-forcing, the art of allowing space for things to unfold. It is not passivity. It is trust, trust in timing, trust in the unfolding nature of sincere connection. In today's world of instant gratification, this wisdom has nearly been forgotten. We rush into closeness. We feel anxious when someone does not respond right away. We overthink silence and try to fill it with more giving, more attention, more energy. But sometimes the silence is necessary. Sometimes the space between two people is where real feeling begins to rise. From a psychological point of view, we understand this through the mechanism of emotional investment. The brain begins to value what it invests energy into. This is known as the IKEA effect in behavioral economics, a phenomenon where people place disproportionately high value on things they have built themselves, even if it's imperfect. Why? Because investment creates attachment. It creates meaning. So when you allow another person to come toward you, not because you withheld yourself as a tactic, but because you respected your own rhythm, you create a space where their energy can enter. And in doing so, you offer them the dignity of their own emotional journey. I once spoke with a man who said he lost interest in every woman he dated after a few weeks. He was sincere in his question. Why does this happen? I want something real, but I keep losing the spark. After some reflection, I asked him to describe how each of these women behaved at the beginning. He replied, they were so sweet, always available, always texting, checking in, asking how I was, planning everything. I never had to do much. I paused and said, that's not their fault. But what you're experiencing is not about the women. It's about you never having to show up. The spark didn't die. It was never lit through effort. Effort is the soil in which connection is planted. And without it, the relationship will always remain superficial, no matter how intense it may feel at first. This brings us to a deeper insight. when you allow others to invest in you, not through manipulation, but through intentional space. You honor the dignity of reciprocal relationship. You allow them to find their pace. You let their curiosity bloom. And most importantly, you show that you believe you are worth the wait. Too many people fear this space. They equate distance with rejection. But space is not rejection. It is potential. Just as the pause between musical notes creates the beauty of the melody, the space between two people creates the opportunity for intentional connection. And now, we must explore a truth even more confronting over. Availability is often a mask worn by those who do not yet know their own value. This is the hidden root of many relational imbalances. We give too much, too fast, not because we are generous, but because we are afraid we are not enough as we are. When you do not believe in your own inner worth, you will try to compensate with external actions. You will over-explain, over-offer, over-accommodate. Not because the other person needs it, but because deep down, you believe that without this constant giving, they will not choose you. This is not generosity. It is self-doubt in motion. A woman I once taught shared how she always went above and beyond for her friends. She planned their birthdays. She was the first to call. She always said yes even when she was exhausted. And yet, she felt invisible, forgotten, overlooked. I asked her, what would happen if you stopped trying? She looked at me, afraid. I think they'd leave. And I said, then what you're doing is not friendship. It is fear disguised as kindness. You see, self-worth is not proven by how much you give. It is revealed in how much you value what you give. When you begin to value your energy, your time, your presence, you begin to offer it with discernment. You begin to say, I am not here to be everything for everyone. I am here to be fully present with those who are also present with me. This discernment changes everything. Not just in how others treat you, but in how you treat yourself. When you stop offering yourself as a way to be liked, you begin to see clearly who truly values you. And often, the silence that follows this shift is not emptiness. It is clarity. Modern neuroscience explains that the brain seeks confirmation of identity through feedback loops. If you believe you are not worthy, you will unconsciously act in ways that elicit that exact reflection from others. You will tolerate disrespect. You will accept half-hearted effort. You will remain in places where your presence is not celebrated, but merely tolerated. And with each repetition of this loop, your inner narrative is reinforced. But when you begin to challenge this loop, when you pause before saying yes, when you breathe before over-giving, when you allow others to rise to meet you, you begin to rewrite the story. The brain's neuroplasticity allows for this transformation. It is not easy, but it is possible, and it is powerful. In Eastern philosophy, we are taught that the outer world is a mirror of the inner world. If your inner world is centered in lack, your relationships will reflect that lack. But if your inner world is rooted in worthiness, in stillness, in clarity, then your relationships will begin to reflect that richness. You begin to attract not what you want, but what you are. Let me share another short story. In a village near the mountains of Shaolin, there lived a man who carried water every day from the river to his home. He had 2 pots, one new, one cracked. Every day, he filled them both. The cracked pot always leaked water, but he never replaced it. One day the pot said, "Master, I am sorry. I lose what you give me. I am broken." The man smiled and replied, "Look at the path from the river to our home. Do you see the flowers growing on your side? I planted seeds, knowing you would leak. Your flaw has created beauty." This is the power of honoring your own vessel, even if you feel cracked, even if you feel uncertain. When you walk in self-awareness, you turn perceived weakness into grace. This is the invitation before you stop giving in order to be chosen. Start giving because you have chosen yourself first. When you no longer need to be overly friendly to be accepted, you begin to radiate a quiet power, a centeredness that is deeply attractive. You become like a mountain, not chasing anyone, not retreating, simply standing. And those who are meant for you will feel your presence and come with reverence. To stop being too available is not to withdraw your love. It is to direct it wisely. It is to remember that your time is finite, your energy sacred, and your presence a gift. When you understand this, you no longer fear who walks away, because you know, deeply, that what remains is true. There is a paradox many people do not yet understand. The more you strive to please everyone, the less respected you become. In our minds, we believe that by being agreeable, flexible, always available, and always saying yes, we will be loved. We confuse kindness with approval seeking and generosity with self-abandonment. And yet, what we find, again and again, is that relationships built on pleasing are unstable. They are brittle. They crumble not because love is absent, but because respect was never fully formed. Respect is not born from how much you give. It is born from how clearly you define what you will and will not accept. In Eastern martial traditions, students are taught from the first day that mastery begins with form. Before a warrior can strike, they must learn stance, the root, the boundary between them, and the ground. If the stance is weak, every movement becomes unstable. And in the same way, when your personal boundaries are unclear, every interaction becomes ungrounded. You react instead of respond. You submit instead of stand. And in time, you begin to feel invisible, unheard, unimportant. This is why boundaries are not about keeping others out. They are about keeping your selfhood intact. Let us look more closely. A boundary is not a wall. It is a bridge of truth. It says, "This is where I stand. If you want to meet me, you must also bring your presence, your care, your awareness." A healthy boundary is a form of spiritual honesty. It is the refusal to betray your inner world for the sake of surface level harmony. Neuroscience tells us that when we consistently override our boundaries, when we say yes while our nervous system is saying no, we activate the body's stress response. The amygdala perceives threat, cortisol levels rise. Over time, this dissonance leads to emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and even depression, not because of external conflict, but because of internal betrayal. When you live in opposition to your truth, the body keeps the score. I once met a woman who spent her entire marriage trying to be the perfect wife. She never raised her voice. She never complained. She handled everything: work, children, household. Her husband didn't mistreat her, but he also didn't see her. He had grown used to her constant giving. One day during a retreat, she broke down in tears and said, "I don't even know what I feel anymore. I just want to be heard." This is the cost of people pleasing. The cost is not only burnout, it is the loss of your voice. When I asked her what her life would look like with boundaries, she hesitated. "I'm afraid they won't like me if I stop doing everything." And here we see the truth that many are too afraid to speak. We sometimes choose to be liked over being respected, even by those closest to us. But here is the wisdom many must hear. If someone only likes you because you constantly accommodate them, that is not love. That is dependency. And dependency is not connection. It is control wrapped in gratitude. Respect begins the moment you stop negotiating your value. There is a Zen saying, "The bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists." But this does not mean to bend endlessly. Bamboo bends in storms, but it does not forget its root. It returns to form. It knows where it belongs. And so must you. Flexibility is a virtue, but without boundaries, it becomes weakness. A boundary is a sacred act of self-alignment. It says, "I choose peace, but not at the cost of my integrity. I choose love, but not at the cost of my dignity. I choose to show up, but I will not disappear." Psychologists have studied the dynamic known as fawning, a trauma response where individuals overplease to avoid conflict. It is a survival strategy, especially for those who in childhood were made to feel that love must be earned through silence or service. These children grow into adults who confuse harmony with submission, and they enter relationships that mirror the same dynamic, the fear that if they speak up, they will be abandoned. But healing begins when we recognize that boundaries are not barriers to love. They are its foundation. Love without boundaries is like a river without banks. It floods, overwhelms, and eventually destroys its own course. Let me share a story. A Shaolin disciple once asked his master, "How do I stop others from taking advantage of my kindness?" The master handed him a cup of tea and said, "Drink." The disciple did. The master refilled the cup. "Drink again." And again, the student obeyed. This continued until the cup overflowed and scalded the disciple's hand. The master said, "This is what happens when you accept more than your vessel can hold. You think you're being kind, but you are spilling everywhere, hurting yourself and others. To hold boundaries is to know when your cup is full. It is to say, I love you, but I cannot keep pouring if I am empty. It is an act of wisdom, not rejection. The emotional discipline to hold a boundary often brings discomfort. People may react. They may accuse you of being cold, selfish, or unkind. But understand this, their reaction is not a reflection of your cruelty. It is a reflection of how accustomed they were to your self-sacrifice. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will rarely celebrate the moment you draw a line. But the discomfort is temporary. Over time, those who are capable of mature love will respect your strength, and those who are not will fall away. This is not loss, it is alignment. To say no when your heart wants to say yes out of guilt is not unloving, it is honest, and honesty is the seed of deep, enduring connection. Imagine a relationship where both individuals have strong boundaries, not defensive walls but clear, respectful self-awareness. In such a space, communication becomes clean, needs are expressed without blame, time is honored, energy is mutual. This is the soil in which real intimacy grows. Too often, people settle for surface harmony instead of cultivating this deeper honesty. But harmony without honesty is fragile. One hard truth, and the whole structure collapses. Boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They allow you to bring your whole self into a relationship, not a diluted, fragmented version afraid of being too much or not enough. You become magnetic not when you are endlessly agreeable, but when you are rooted in your essence. There is a calm that emerges when you no longer seek permission to protect your peace. A calm that cannot be taken by others' opinions, moods, or judgments. In this calm, your relationships begin to transform, not because others change, but because your presence commands a different energy. From a physiological perspective, the nervous system begins to regulate itself more effectively when boundaries are consistently upheld. Your vagus nerve, which plays a key role in emotional resilience, responds to safety and congruence. When your actions align with your inner truth, your body rests, your sleep improves, your digestion calms, your breath deepens. You begin to experience life not as a battlefield of reactivity, but as a temple of conscious choice. And this affects every relationship. You begin to attract not those who need you to shrink, but those who meet you where you stand. There is a beautiful quiet that follows the first true boundary you set. It is the sound of your spirit returning to its rightful shape, not compressed by obligation, not stretched by guilt, but whole. Let us remember, the purpose of boundaries is not to keep others small. It is to keep your soul expansive. Do not be afraid to say, "This does not work for me." It is not a rejection. It is an invitation, for yourself and others, to move toward clarity, presence, and mutual respect. There is a deeper layer of discipline here. The discipline not to over-explain, not to convince others to understand your limits. A boundary is not a debate. It is a declaration. You do not owe anyone justification for choosing self-respect. You are not harsh for having limits. You are healthy. You are not distant for saying, "Enough." You are discerning. You are not cold for stepping back from those who repeatedly dishonor your space. You are wise. In time, as you practice this, you will find a new power rising within you. A power that no longer needs to be everything for everyone. A power that moves with quiet certainty. A power that no longer fears being alone, because you are no longer abandoning yourself to be with others. This is what it means to walk the path of self-mastery, to honor the space between you and others, not with fear, but with reverence. To respect yourself so deeply that others have no choice but to rise to that level, or leave. In today's world of constant exposure, where lives are broadcast in real time, emotions are made public before they are processed, and availability is worn like a badge. Many people confuse accessibility with authenticity. They believe that to be seen is to be known, and to be known is to be loved. But this is a misunderstanding. What draws people to one another, what creates attraction that lasts beyond novelty, is not how much you share, but how much you contain. There is a profound difference between hiding and holding, between secrecy and sacredness, between manipulation and mystery. Mystery, when understood correctly, is not a tactic. It is a natural consequence of inner richness. It is the quiet strength of someone who knows themselves deeply and does not feel the need to explain that depth to everyone they meet. In Eastern philosophy, there is a teaching that says, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Some things are not meant to be verbalized. They are meant to be experienced, sensed, unfolded over time. And so too is the energy of a person who has cultivated mystery through stillness, not strategy. In relationships, we often try to fast-track connection. We overshare. We overcommit. We think that revealing everything quickly will make someone feel closer. But closeness is not born from information. It is born from resonance. You can know every detail about someone and still feel no intimacy, and you can know very little and still feel completely seen. True magnetic energy arises when a person is fully present, yet not fully revealed. When their energy says, "I am here with you," but also, "I belong to myself." There is something sacred about someone who doesn't give all their colors at once. They invite curiosity, not through playing games, but through depth. They do not conceal who they are, but they do not feel obligated to display every layer prematurely. This way of being does not mean you are cold or unavailable. It means your presence is not scattered. Your life force is not leaking out through constant self-exposure. In neuroscience, this aligns with the concept of dopaminergic regulation. When people are constantly stimulated by new information, novelty, and rapid emotional highs, their ability to sustain interest over time diminishes. Mystery regulates this. It paces the connection. It allows the mind and heart to stay engaged, not through artificial scarcity, but through genuine pacing rooted in emotional intelligence. Think of a candle. If you expose it to strong wind, the flame extinguishes. But when you shield it, when you cup it with reverence and allow its light to flicker gently, it glows steadily. Your energy, your essence, your inner world. This is the flame. Not everyone should be allowed to blow through it. Some moments are meant to be kept within the warmth of your own hands, until the person before you has shown they are willing to sit in silence and witness it without grasping. Mystery is not the absence of connection. It is the refinement of connection. It filters out the noise. It ensures that the bond formed is not based on what you perform, but who you are. Many people today feel emotionally depleted not because they are unloved, but because they are overexposed. Every thought is shared, every emotion explained, every movement posted, and slowly, the well runs dry. Not because there is no water, but because the bucket was never pulled back to refill. Mystery is the art of pulling back, not to manipulate, but to restore. One woman I once guided through mindful self-mastery had a history of turbulent relationships. Each time she met someone, she felt compelled to give everything quickly. Her story, her wounds, her hopes, even her daily schedule. She thought transparency would prove her sincerity. But the pattern was always the same: intensity, followed by emotional fatigue, then disinterest from the other. She came to me and asked, "Why do they always leave when I've given them everything?" I asked her, "What if that's the very reason?" We explored what it meant to cultivate depth, not through defensiveness, but through discernment. She began practicing silence, mindfulness, and delayed sharing. She replaced the compulsion to explain with the intention to observe. Slowly, her presence changed. She no longer reached outward for validation. She began listening more than she spoke. Her interactions became more potent, less performative. And in time, she met someone who was drawn not to her stories, but to her stillness. Mystery gave her back her magnetism. In the Shaolin tradition, energy is preserved through intention. Every movement is purposeful. Every gesture is backed by internal presence. There is no wasted motion. Similarly, in relationship, mystery is a kind of energy preservation. You do not waste your life force in superficial engagement. You do not chase connection. You invite it through presence. You give space for others to lean in, rather than constantly leaning forward. There is also a biological basis for this. According to polyvagal theory, our nervous system responds not only to external behavior, but to the quality of presence. When someone is grounded, self-contained, and regulated, they emit signals of safety and strength. Others feel this energetically, even without words. This is why certain people enter a room and shift the energy, not because they are loud or impressive, but because they are integrated. Mystery is the natural result of such integration. It is not something you do. It is something you become when your attention returns inward. Mystery is lost when we seek constant confirmation. When we feel we must always be responding, always explaining, always sharing. But when we detach from this need, something powerful begins to happen. We become rooted. Our energy becomes concentrated. And in that concentration, others sense something rare, an invitation, not a demand, a presence, not a persona. It is important here to distinguish mystery from emotional unavailability. Being mysterious does not mean being aloof, avoidant, or dismissive. Emotional withholding is a defense mechanism born of fear. Mystery, on the other hand, is born of inner sufficiency. It is what happens when you are not desperate to be chosen, when your value is not dependent on another's opinion. There is a story of a monk who spent years meditating in solitude. When he returned to the village, people were captivated by his presence. He hardly spoke, he simply moved through the market with calm eyes and a half smile. Children followed him. Strangers offered him food. One young man asked him, "Why do people look at you like that? You've said nothing, and yet they are drawn to you." The monk replied, "Because I carry the silence they forgot they needed." This is mystery. It is not silent to be absent. It is silent to be more fully there. In relationships, preserving mystery means honoring the natural rhythm of revelation. It means recognizing that love, like all things sacred, is not a flood. It is a flow. You do not need to explain every part of yourself on the first date, the second message, the third conversation. Let some things emerge in their time. Let your story unfold like a slow sunrise, not a spotlight. Mystery also applies to emotional availability. Not every feeling must be verbalized instantly. Sometimes, sitting with your emotion deepens your wisdom. Sometimes, expressing it too early disrupts the growth of understanding. A mature person does not suppress emotions, but neither do they leak them. They sit with their truth until it becomes clear enough to be spoken with precision, not reaction. This is emotional discipline, and emotional discipline sustains attraction. It creates safety. It signals that you are capable of holding not only your own inner world, but also the shared space of the relationship. Consider how flowers bloom. They do not unfold all their petals at once. They respond to sunlight, to time, to rhythm, and so must you. There is no rush, there is only readiness. The paradox of mystery is this: the more you withhold your energy with intention, the more powerful your presence becomes. Not because you are hiding, but because you are centered. You no longer scatter your worth across every interaction. You no longer need to prove your depth. You embody it. This is where confidence begins. Not in being the most impressive, but in being the most authentic without explanation. There is great wisdom in withholding, in allowing silence to speak before you do, in trusting that not everything needs to be said to be felt. Some of the most powerful moments in connection are born from stillness, not speech. And in this stillness, you begin to see clearly. You no longer chase people who cannot meet you. You no longer perform for attention. You no longer explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding you. You simply are, and that beingness is magnetic. Mystery, then, is not a strategy. It is a reflection of spiritual maturity. It is what naturally arises when you stop giving yourself away too easily. When you understand that your energy is not a public resource, it is a sacred reservoir, to be shared with discernment, devotion, and depth. Let your mystery protect you. Let it be the veil that keeps your light from being dimmed by those who do not know how to hold it. Let it be the silence that calls only those who are willing to sit and wait for your truth to emerge, not to consume it, but to honor it. Let it be the rhythm of your life, unfolding in sacred timing, untouched by the noise of urgency or performance. And let it be the invisible thread that weaves authenticity, attraction, and deep love into every step of your path. There comes a point in one's journey where you begin to understand that respect, connection, and peace are not granted by others. They are cultivated within. When you are too friendly, too available, too eager to please, what you are truly doing is placing your worth in someone else's hands. And when your worth is up for negotiation, people will bargain it down. To be respected, you must first respect yourself, not in a loud, boastful way, but in a steady, quiet way that shows through how you speak, how you carry yourself, how you say no when it's not aligned. And yes, only when your soul is fully present. You do not need to be aggressive. You do not need to perform toughness. Inner strength is silent. Dignity is subtle, but their presence is undeniable. And that is what others respond to. Not your friendliness, not your availability, but your energy. The more you leak it, the more you lose yourself. The more you preserve it, the more you rise in value. Not just to others, but to yourself. People cannot respect what they can easily reach and take without effort. Even water, essential for life, is more cherished when drawn from a protected well. So protect your well. Let your boundaries be sacred. Let your silence speak. Let your mystery unfold in its time. Offer your presence, not as proof of your worth, but as an invitation for those ready to meet you with reverence, not convenience. Life is not about how many people like you. It is about how many people truly honor who you are. And that begins the moment you do. Walk with presence. Speak with intention. Connect with awareness. And know this: when your energy is no longer freely given to everything and everyone, the right ones will value it more. Not because you manipulated them, but because you finally mastered yourself. This is the discipline. This is the wisdom. This is the path. And when you walk it with clarity, calm, and courage, you will find that you don't need to chase love, validation, or respect. You attract it by becoming the kind of person who already carries it within.